Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe with Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock, recording this here on Wednesday. It's about 1 o'clock. You're probably hearing this on Thursday. Just a quick scheduling update. It is the bye week, of course. So normally we would do our preview pod on Thursday into Friday. Nothing to preview this week. We're going to actually take advantage of this bye week. So, knock on wood, unless something crazy happens, this is going to be the last time you're going to hear from us on this podcast until probably on Monday when the Browns are back at it in Berea. Again, anything can happen with this football team. We know that, but that's our current schedule. So speaking of crazy things happening, I had wanted to talk about this before we hit record. And then Mary Kay, you tweeted out that it's not going to happen. You sent it out to our text subscribers too, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get involved with that. But I'm going to pull up your tweet here right now. Zero chance the Browns would trade Myles Garrett, I'm told, hasn't even been discussed. And this is something that has taken on kind of a life of its own over the last couple days. Of course, Myles Garrett has been very open with his displeasure of how this season is going. He's said that he's going to talk to the front office, the coaching staff here during the bye week. He's going to be involved in that stuff, some changes that need to be made, all of that. So that has fueled kind of the sports talk machine in Cleveland and now outside of Cleveland, and it has become a topic. But for anyone who was trying to come up with some Myles Garrett fantasy trades or whatever, you threw a bucket of cold water on that. Myles Garrett isn't going anywhere, at least before next Tuesday's trade deadline.
No, he's not. And I actually checked into this last night because I had seen one more column speculating that they should do it and they should think about it. And I felt funny even kind of asking around and checking around about it because it seemed so ludicrous with the big, huge guarantee they just gave him and the big contract that they gave him. And if they were going to trade Myles Garrett, certainly wouldn't it have been when he was running around Radio Row at the Super Bowl trying to get the heck out of here before they gave him $40 million a year and before they gave him the enormous signing bonus? Wouldn't it have been then? Certainly not going to be now when they just gave him all of that money and all of that guaranteed money that would crush them if they tried to get out from underneath it right now. So again, I felt a little funny asking about it even, but I was actually, told last night that there was no chance. And I was going to write a story about that today. Once again, not really thinking that there was some kind of sense of urgency about this because I felt it was ludicrous. And I think you guys probably would agree with that. It was not something that we felt it was front burner, but it started to take on a life of its own and ultimately had to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I understand why people kind of made it a discussion point because of all the things Myles has said and because obviously he's not happy with how this season is going. I mean, look, nobody's happy with how this season is going in that building. They're 2-6 and Myles is very outspoken about it, but also because he made that trade request in the offseason, has said repeatedly he wants to go somewhere and he wants to be on a winner, whether that's here or, like when he made that trade request potentially someplace else. So I understand, I guess, why it's something that could get legs. For anyone who follows the NBA, this stuff, I mean, that's what they're built on, is trade speculation. And could this team do this? Could this team do that? But Ashley, it's just, you've got to look at that contract and you've got to look at all that dead money and you've got to look at that situation this football team is in. And at least right now, and maybe we can talk a little bit about if it's possible in the offseason, but it just doesn't make sense when you consider all the dead money this team is already carrying and could potentially add more this offseason. I mean, David Njoku's cap hit is like $20 million next year. So, and he's not even under contract. So they've got a lot of work to do with the cap. They're still carrying the Deshaun Watson contract. You add this type of dead money on top of that, you're basically done for 2 years. There's almost nothing you can do.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about before we hit record. If you would do this, you would be in full rebuild tank. You would have to just eat that dead money for a few years and build up through the draft basically with these cheaper contracts. But yeah, this reminded me of when Myles Garrett made that trade request in February, and it became clear very quickly there was no financial way for the Browns to trade him pre-June 1st, right? The money situation at that time was such that they would have to wait till post June 1st to do anything with him. And at that point, you're talking about no draft compensation for the 2025 draft anyway. So, like, what incentive is there to do that deal with all the money you would have had to eat? And this was all pre-extension, by the way. So now what is interesting about it is more so in the off season again, if Myles Garrett would be so disgruntled and once again on out. And the interesting element in it all is he now has that no trade clause, which he didn't have before. Players rarely have, but it does give players more agency. But I think right now it would be such a ludicrous move for this team to make. It just wouldn't make any sense financially.
Yeah, I mean, just to put it out there, from this is from Over the Cap. If the Browns were to trade Myles Garrett pre-June 1st, they would have $41 million of dead cap next season, $25 million of dead cap in 2027, and then it gets a little more manageable. You'd be looking at $13 million and $4 million. Now, those numbers are more palatable if you trade him after June 1st once again, but then you're missing out on that opportunity to get those draft picks immediately and add talent immediately. You'd have to wait a whole nother year to even benefit from this trade at all in that regard. And again, on top of all that, you're still navigating this Deshaun Watson contract. You're kind of tied up against the cap as it is. You know, Mary Kay, this just feels like, again, a sports talk topic that kind of spiraled out of control a little bit, and people knew they could kind of get some clicks if they threw out some speculation about it and what it might look like, and maybe having fun on social media, like the Who Says No posts, all of that stuff. It's all well and good, but I just think people need to understand it's just not realistic.
No, it's not realistic. And like you said, it's just one of those things that can really get people fired up. He just came off 5 sacks. He's tied for the NFL lead now with 10. Lots of teams would love to get their hands on him. This follows him slamming his helmet down on the sideline, and it all comes after he asked to be traded in the offseason. So you can kind of connect the dots and see that, hey, maybe something could happen here. But it's really, like you said, sports talk fodder. It's internet fodder. And I'm really glad to be able to kind of shut it down, because it was starting to get crazy. And the trade deadline isn't, once again, until November 4th. And it's nice to kind of just put an end to this right now.
And look, I think there's probably people out there that do want this team to just sort of say, hey, let's be done for the next 2 years and, acquire a bunch of draft picks and just completely tear this thing down and rebuild it. I don't think that's their vision either. So Ashley, again, it just does, it doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense from what we can tell of what this team's vision is for the near future. We've talked about it on this pod a little bit. They're kind of straddling that line a little of, they're doing a little bit of a rebuild, but they also have some talent that's still young enough, and Myles Garrett falls into that category, that if you can sort of get this thing pointed in the right direction in the next season or two, those guys are going to help you. Those guys are going to accelerate wherever this is going. So again, if they wanted to just tear this thing down, sure, we can talk about it, but I just have never gotten the sense that that's what they want to do.
Yeah, they really are just straddling those two worlds. And I know, like Mary Kay's described it like this, you have to think about this team's core right now in two groups. So there is like the Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, I would throw David Njoku in there, like that main group, right? Which has been their core for the last 7-ish years, who still arguably in their primes, like you're still trying to win with them as cornerstones of your franchise. But now you also have what I would consider to be Andrew Berry's best draft class so far, and some really, really good rookie talent that you are also now trying to build. Like, we know what they think of Quinshon Judkins. He is the cornerstone of their run game now. Mason Graham, a long-term solution for them on the inside. Carson Schwesinger just taking over that linebacker room and coming along quicker than I think even like I expected. And I really liked Carson from the moment we saw him out there in rookie minicamp and some of the things he could do. So you think about that and you understand why, okay, they're not going like full rebuild. And again, I bring this up every time we talk about this idea of rebuilds or tanking, because I think there is a segment of the fan base that just really is drawn in by this idea of tanking and getting draft picks. They tried that. It's gotten you one playoff win. A lot of those draft picks didn't pan out. And as we like to joke, draft picks a lot of the time are a marketing strategy. Like, they're unknown entities and you don't know what you are actually going to get with them. And if like these people in charge, if you would do a tank, if these people in charge would even be around to make those picks anymore, to me, it just doesn't work. It's not like, I think, as feasible to do it in the NFL as it is even in the NBA. And again, I think like the NBA has infiltrated so much of how NFL fans think about the trade deadline, how they think about tanking, and just the nature of the sport. They're not the same. You cannot equate the two, I don't think.
Yeah, and the NBA has always kind of embraced that transactional discussion, right? Like, the transactional side of it is almost as important as the games now. And people love, right? Fantasy football exists because people love that part of it. They love that side of, building rosters and draft picks and all that stuff. So I understand that. I would also say this, like, first of all, with the tanking discussion, you went 3-14 last year. I don't know what your record's going to be this year. Even if you beat the teams you're supposed to beat, that gets you what, 5, 6, if you want to be optimistic, maybe 7, like if you beat the teams you're supposed to beat. So, that's not like a full bottoming out, but those are good draft picks. And Mary Kay, I would argue that, and you know me, I'm always the optimist with this football team. But I would argue like there is a pretty clear path forward for this team. Now, whether that's, do they have the right people in place to execute it? Do they have, will they be able to actually pull it off? Those are discussions on top of this, but just on paper, there is a pretty clear path forward here because this draft class was good. You added, just to name the 3 standouts, Mason Graham, Quinshon Judkins, Carson Schwesinger, and of course Harold Fannin. I need to include him too. So those are 4 guys that are part of your future. And you've got 2 first-round picks next year. You've got, I'm looking at it right now, 5 picks, 4 on the first 2 days of the draft, and then a 5th pick that's probably going to be pretty early on day 3. There is a path forward to, kind of looking up next April and seeing a light at the end of this tunnel. Now, does that mean they start contending next year or they're a playoff team next year? I don't know. A lot of that depends on the quarterback, but there is a path forward. And I don't think they have to take such extreme measures as like trade Myles Garrett and get draft capital, from a team that's probably going to be picking at the end of the first round anyway. And, think 3 years down the road.
Absolutely, 100%. There is a path forward. And we've talked about this so many times. This draft in 2025 was designed to sort of lay the foundation and get some really key pieces into the building. And they've done that. I think Quinshon has already proven that he can be an adequate replacement for Nick Chubb. And that's not an easy thing to do. He can do that. So they have that. They have Harold Fannin, who seems to be sort of the heir apparent to David Njoku, if they're going to move on from David at any point. You've got Carson Schwesinger, who has already established himself as a very big hitter and a great leader, the green sticker guy, the field general on defense. Mason Graham, he needs to come up the learning curve a little bit more, but he should be really, really good and a foundational piece for that defense. The quarterbacks, we don't know about those guys yet. We just truly don't know. But it seems to be shaping up that maybe those guys, Dylan and or Shador, are developmental guys that could end up being backups, maybe work into something more. Who knows about that? But it really seems like the quarterback is going to come from next year's draft. That's where this whole thing is going. And then they've got, as you mentioned, 4 draft picks on the first 2 days. So if you add those guys and you purchase a couple players in free agency, some role players, extend some of your guys, they've got to figure out the offensive line. We know that. But if they can bolster the offense a little bit next year with the quarterback and a couple of receivers, and then figure out the offensive line, there is a path forward. It's not going to be easy. They still have a lot of things that they need to do to get where they need to be. But there is definitely a path forward. And I don't think that, I think they learned the hard way that tearing things down to the studs is just not a viable option in the NFL. It's not necessary. You don't see teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers doing it. You don't see teams like the Baltimore Ravens doing it. I mean, it just doesn't need to be done. You don't have to get horrible and awful to get back to winning. You just don't have to do it. So, and again, I don't think that this year was supposed to be a horrible, awful, awful year. I think this was supposed to be about a 7-win season is what I think it was probably supposed to be. Maybe they go 7-10 this year. And I think that was a reasonable request if you could stop turning the ball over and get some clean game management quarterback play. We've said it a million times. It should have been that. And it just hasn't been that. The quarterback thing just didn't work out. I still think, and I've said this yesterday when we did our sort of wish list for what we would do for the offense, I still think that if you brought in one really good receiver and a quarterback that could get the job done and get the ball to these guys and settle down the quarterback position, I still think they can win 6 games this season. I think they can win 4. They could win 4 out of their last 9 if they had those things. And I made the point before the season that they could go anywhere from 7 to optimistically 10 victories if they got good quarterback play. Good quarterback play. That's what it was going to take. And they haven't gotten that. And I wrote a whole column today saying I think they should turn the play calling over to Tommy Rees. I still don't think Shedeur Sanders is the answer this year for the fix. I don't think it's the fix. The offense is too shaky. It's too much of a mess. You can't throw him into this situation and expect that a rookie quarterback who would need so much support around him is the fix right now. I just don't see how so many people think that it would be.
Yeah, and I mean, I was a little more pessimistic. I think my season prediction was like 6 wins, and that was sort of like my optimistic, put this in print, optimistic prediction. But part of that is because like I looked at the quarterback situation, I didn't love it, and I didn't think they had that guy in Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders that was going to come in and have like a Jaden Daniels type of effect on this roster or something like that. But the reality is, and I don't know if that guy is in this draft yet, or if he's going to be available in a trade or free agency. We'll see. We're so far away from the draft. Like this thing is just going to keep developing and changing between now and the end of April. But as stupid as it sounds, like as simple as it sounds, like it really is sometimes like just get your quarterback, like just figure out quarterback and everything else can fall into place. And yeah, you need to get weapons. Yes, you need to fix this up, figure out what you're doing on your O-line. Does the O-line need to be completely remade? Do you bring back like Ethan and Wyatt? And then if Joel retires, you kind of make the rest around them. Like, you figure that stuff out. But if you can solve quarterback, like you mentioned the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? The year they got Big Ben, I don't know, what did they win? 6 games the year before that? So they have that one year where they win like 6 games or whatever it was, get a high pick, they get their quarterback, and then they don't look back for 20 years. So that is really kind of what it comes down to, Ashley. It's like get that quarterback figured out, which, as this franchise has shown us over and over again, is much easier said than done.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, right? Like we talk about all the time, if quarterback evaluation were easy, then every team in the NFL would have their franchise quarterback. But it's about so much more than college production and traits, right? Like it's about fit. Like so much of it is about understanding what you want. And like so many times stuff in this league happens where it's like Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. I think a lot of teams thought Patrick Mahomes was good, but they didn't see it the way Kansas City saw it. Same thing with, look at the 2018 draft, the infamous 2018 draft. Some teams saw it with Josh Allen. Some teams and Mary Kay. Let's say and Mary Kay. Mary Kay's Josh Allen victory lap that we'll always let her take. Like you have to see it, and you have to have this vision, and you have to know what you want, and you have to have the coach and the play caller for that guy, and the other pieces oftentimes I think do have to be in place, like that Commanders plan with Jaden Daniels. So it's like they have not been able to figure this out post 99. Like that's just the reality. And I think what's unfortunate in these recent years is looking at all the other talent that was there. And I think like decades from now, there's going to be a lot of what ifs about these early 2020s Browns teams and how good the defense was. And, for a lot of fans, how good Nick Chubb was. And to some extent, what Baker Mayfield has done in Tampa after leaving here. Like there's so many what ifs. And that to me makes it, all the more imperative that you find that guy and go all in on that guy.
Yeah, and I think to your point too about like Josh Allen, and we could say this a little bit about Patrick Mahomes too. You not only do you have to identify the guy and find him, but you've got to commit to it. Like you've got to have your plan and you've got to work it. So like the Chiefs brought in Mahomes and they decided to go one more year with Alex Smith. Maybe Mahomes would have been great right away. Maybe you didn't need that year to sit, but that's the plan they put in place. And then they put Mahomes in and it levels them up. Josh Allen, right? I mean, after their rookie years, I would be curious what some writers in Buffalo were saying about Josh Allen versus Baker Mayfield. But the Bills believed in their development plan for Josh, and after a rocky rookie year, he started to look like the player they knew he could be, and now he's an MVP candidate every year. So it's not just picking the quarterback. It's identifying the quarterback and having a real plan in place and sticking by that plan no matter what, which that worries me a little bit, Mary Kay, because I feel like there was a plan in place for these rookie quarterbacks and then things didn't go great in the first 3 weeks and they were like, you know what, let's just turn this thing over to Dylan Gabriel. And obviously through 4 games, it hasn't gone great for him. But I think that's a big piece of it too, is like if you take a Lenora Sellers, if that's the guy they love, you're hoping he turns into Josh Allen and not Anthony Richardson, but it's probably going to take a little bit of development to get him where you want him to get to. So that's a big part of it too, is understanding the player you're taking and making sure that you've got a plan in place to get that player to where you think he can be.
That's right. But there are a number of rookie quarterbacks who have been able to come in and be reasonably successful in their first seasons. Not all of them. But if you look back to last year's class, there were a number of those guys who did pretty well. But you have to have the pieces and parts around them. You have to call it right. You've got to be able to run the ball. You have to have a good defense and all of those kinds of things. But if you get all that stuff right, then a good young rookie quarterback can come in and be successful. Maybe not to the Jaden Daniels level that he was right away. Maybe not to the CJ Stroud level that he was necessarily right away. But you can find a guy like that can kind of come in and salvage this situation. And even when I look at Dylan Gabriel, there are so many times, so many passes when I look out there and I think, if there was a more accurate quarterback, if there was a little bit better of a quarterback, this might not look so bad. I think he has potential. I think he's got potential, but I just don't think he's necessarily ready yet. And his playing time, his starting assignment was accelerated. It wasn't supposed to be this soon. The hamstring injury by Kenny Pickett just messed everything up. And who knows if Kenny would have been able to come in here and get much done either. I'm not too sure, because it seems like the receiving core was left wanting, right? I mean, it just seems like that might not have been up to snuff. And maybe there isn't a quarterback that would have been able to salvage what's happening right now. I mean, it can't be that Cedric Tillman was the big piece that you took out and the whole thing fell down. I mean, that just can't be it, right? But certainly when your deep threat guy is Isaiah Bond and he's catching something like 37% of his passes, I mean, that's not up to NFL standards, not even close. And Jerry Jeudy is catching 40% of his passes right now. So that's basically been a mess. And no matter which quarterback they try to start right now, they don't have an answer in their pass receiving core unless, like I said, unless Tommy can come in here and just reconfigure everything and try to figure out how to get the most out of this passing game. Now, we know that they added back Brendan Bates. So maybe they're thinking, we talked about this yesterday, maybe they're thinking of doing more 2 tight ends, more 3 tight ends, and kind of going to that heavy tight end 13 personnel offense that the Patriots had to do one year. Sometimes you have to do things like that. There seems to be a way to get more out of this offense than they are getting to this point. It really feels like there should be a way. When you've got still some really good guys on the offensive line, I think, and you have David Njoku and Harold Fannin and Quinshon Judkins and Jerry Jeudy. I mean, it seems like you should be able to get some production out of this offense, and they're not getting it. They're just not getting it. Like I said, I would be adding a receiver or 2 before the trade deadline, and I would be trying to figure out how you can get a veteran quarterback in here that can do better than what we're seeing.
And a part of that too is I don't know how you even evaluate. Like, obviously, part of the struggles have been on Dylan Gabriel, but I don't even know how you evaluate him or Shedeur Sanders throwing to these receivers. Like, I don't even know how you can get an evaluation on them at all. So even just adding one guy, if it doesn't cost you huge amounts of draft capital, just giving yourself a little bit of a chance to get an evaluation on both of these quarterbacks that's one of the missions of this season is figuring out who these two guys are, especially if it kind of keeps going the way it goes. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens here over the trade deadline. But one thing we know, Myles Garrett is not going to go anywhere. So Ashley, we can say that for sure. Add a receiver, whatever people want this team to do at the trade deadline, 95 is still going to be here when they play the Jets in New Jersey in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we do know that, and look, there are things that I want them to do with this team before the deadline to fix it. But again, I think it's just worth noting, like, the NFL trade deadline is typically never as crazy as fans expect it to be or want it to be. And I'm saying that now and I'm like, well, famous last words, but I typically think it's just like the nature of the league, right? And two, I think about the fact, like, the Browns were one of the teams that actually wanted this pushed back even like a week further because the trade deadline used to be so early. It's like teams are trying to still figure out where they stand, if they would even want to be buyers or sellers. So part of it's the time of year it falls. It's been pushed back a week, so it's a little better. But it's hard, I think, for a lot of teams to gauge what exactly they want to do at this time of year. And by the time you know that, the deadline has typically already come and gone.
Okay, we're going to wrap things up there here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast here on a Thursday. So we started with Myles Garrett. We talked about receivers, quarterback. We just kind of hit record and let it go where it went today. So we are going to, like I said, unless something happens, we're going to take a little bit of a pod break. We're only going to miss one pod, I think, overall. So we'll be back on Monday. The Browns are back in the building on Monday. So we'll be out there. We'll have a pod on Monday, and then we'll be right back into the groove next week out of the bye as they get ready for the Jets. Get subscribed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I keep telling you about our socials now. Our guy Dom is pumping out socials for us, a Syracuse student doing a great job. Orange and Brown Talk on Instagram and Orange Brown Talk on Twitter. Our YouTube is Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Get subscribed over there. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.